Hello and welcome, my name is Jay, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make a ruin building, in this case for Warhammer 40k, made easy. And it almost can't get simpler than this. The two primary ingredients for this are foamboard or foam core and sand, and there's not much else to it, but it does, I think, look pretty nice. We will be taking a closer look towards the end. We'll be doing nice pictures and videos, etc. But for now, if at the end of this video you like this video, do press like, it really does help. And if you're not subscribed to the channel and you're interested in terrain for all kinds of wargaming, please do subscribe, that helps as well. If you really want to support me further and support my goal of making terrain more accessible for people, for all kinds of games, then do consider supporting me on Patreon. That really truly does help. So without further ado, let's get on to showing you how I made it, and we'll talk more at the end. To keep this video as simple as possible, I'm not actually going to go through all of the measurements involved. However, I have created a template as a PDF that you can just get in the description below. So let's get on to it. We're doing a corner piece of a ruined building, so obviously we need two wall sections. So I just roughly cut my foam board to size. Ideally try and use a sharp blade as it will slice through foam board easier. This is 5mm foam board, and that is important if you're using my templates. Once you've got your two wall pieces, we're then going to draw the detail of your building onto the wall pieces, so that includes windows, any columns you're using, and that kind of detail. Keep in mind you also need to sometimes take into consideration the thickness of the foam board. Now when you come to the windows, if you're doing like an arch as a window like I am, I would recommend doing that as a template. Cut that out of cardboard or foam board or what have you, and just do that once and then use that as a template going forward for all of your windows. Once you're happy with both your wall pieces, it's got the detailing on as you like, you can start cutting things out. And we're going to start with the windows. Now cutting out the windows is fairly straightforward unless you're doing an arch window. Doing the arches can be a little bit tricky. Doing curves in foamboard can just be a little bit tricky, especially like when it's inside of a piece rather than at the end. And there's two methods that I use. You can either just slice it as you normally would and rotate your hand as best you can, or the other method that I use is to sort of jab at it to cut the first layer of card and then slice through it. Either way, the sharper the blade the better. Don't cut yourself. Cut out your windows, and what you actually want to do here is keep your insert window pieces. We're going to use those for the window ledges in a moment. Once you've got your two wall pieces with the template on it, the windows cut out, we need to consider that when we glue these together, we need the corner pieces to be the exact same height. So just keep that in mind. So just be sure that you know which side you're actually going to glue together. And then I'm just going to take a pen and just do a rough line, which I think will make a nice ruined building. This is the destroyed section of the building. I take my pen, I draw out a line, and then I simply cut that out. Do that for both sections of your wall. It can be quite satisfying when they pop apart. Now because I only drew the template on one side, I very quickly just measure the columns on the other side of the wall as well, just by freehanding it. You could, if you wanted, just draw the template out on both sides. Then we're going to glue our two pieces together. Now weirdly, I'm going to glue the longer side to the shorter side, but my columns, it's actually the reverse. I didn't necessarily think this through possibly the best, but the column that is the widest where I'm going to glue them together is the one that is going to be glued to. I'm just using hot glue to glue these together. You could use PVA, but PVA would take a little bit longer and you might need to pin it. Try and make sure you've got a 90-degree angle for your building. It doesn't really matter too much because foam board has a bit of flexibility. On the inside of the building, I'm going to have a ruined floor, and that will be the extent of the width of this building. To do this, I just got a spare piece of foam board, marked off where the building edges are, drew a line between them, and then just cut out that bit of foam board. Obviously I had a 90-degree angle for the corner piece, but the video will explain that better, I think. Cut that line out. Obviously you don't want it to be an exact straight line, so a curved line here is better. Make it look a bit more natural. We're going to bevel the edges of that just to make it so it will blend into your board a little bit better. And then we're going to hot glue our floor panel into the building corner. So all I do, I just run a ream of hot glue across the bottom of the building and then slide in my piece. Make sure you don't glue your building to your table. And then we're going to come back to the windows, and the reason I asked you to keep them is we know the width of those windows are the exact width of the actual windows in our building. So then we're going to cut out 1 centimeter strips of these, and these 1 centimeter strips we're going to use as window ledges. Obviously they'll be the correct width, and the reason it's 1 centimeter is our foam board is 5mm thick and this is now 10mm, and we just want it to overhang a little bit both on the inside and on the outside. Just a little bit of detailing. Hot glue those in place, and the building really, I think at this stage, is starting to come together. And then it's time to do our columns. Now in this case, we're going to need a lot of 2cm strips of columns. I don't know the exact number, just do lots of them. Now these centimeter strips need to be taller than your building, so when we glued the wall pieces together, we weren't really too concerned about how it looked, and that's because I was always planning on coming back with these 2cm strips or columns and doing a nicer join. Now doing this join is actually reasonably complicated to explain, but I will try my best. So take a pen and mark a 5mm strip on one of the 2cm columns. Then we're going to take our knife and we're going to put the knife between the foam and one side of the card on the foam board. So what we're doing is slicing down, keeping the paper intact as best you can, but cutting through the foam. And you'll do that all the way to the bottom. Try and obviously do this as a 5mm cut. Be very careful, do not cut your hands. Once you've got your little cut between your foam and one section of the card, we're then going to try and cut through that 5mm line that we drew. But when you slice through it, you do not want to slice through the whole of the foam board. You want to cut through the first layer of card and the foam, but you want to leave intact the bottom layer of card. Now I failed this the first couple of times that I did it, so don't panic if you do. That's why we cut out a lot of the strips. Once you're happy with your cut, you can start peeling it away, and you should notice that you'll have a nice little 5mm by 5mm section of foam just nicely coming off and peeling away. If you don't, just try again. And then if you take another column and you put that into the 5mm slit that you've just cut out, we can dry fit those on the corner of the building where we've, the 90-degree angle on the very corner. Dry fit that together. You'll notice that the seam is much nicer now because it's just one line down on the exact extreme edge of it. We're going to hot glue those in place. Obviously make sure your column is taller than your building. Then it's just a simple case of gluing all of the columns in place, obviously with your special corner piece done first. So we want to glue all of the column pieces in place on the outside. We don't want to do them on the inside just yet. So for the inside, we're actually going to cut the columns down to a size that's going to support our floor. Now in this case, I actually do 9cm high columns, which my floor will then be 9.5cm in total because we've got to take into consideration the width of the foam board. So these columns are 9cm, they're still 2cm wide, and we're going to glue those in place, obviously in line with the columns on the outside. And then we're going to add a extra floor here. Now all I do here is take a bit of foam board, mark off where the edge of the buildings are, do a rough line again like I was doing for the base, and cut that out. Bevel your top floor the same as we did for the bottom floor. And this is the time where you want to sort of damage your top floor so it looks like it's actually been destroyed and fallen through. And then we're going to glue that in place, so you can just put hot glue either on your columns, or you can just run the bead of glue along your top floor on the edge of it and then slide that into place. Then we're going to add the inside columns on the top floor. Now the only caveat to this is you need to make sure that the height of them is higher than the wall. And we're going to do a strip along the sides, and for this it's again 2cm strip, and the width of this in my case happens to be 5cm, but just make sure you cut it to size. And we're going to slot them into place with hot glue, and they'll stick nicely. One of the fun bits is to destroy the columns because we want the columns to be in line with the actual walls. All you do though is take your sharp blade, put it against your wall and just try and slice through. It doesn't matter if you take a few tries, like if you do one column first and then the other column. You just want to blend in your columns with your wall, and it's a nice time here to start damaging things, like if you want damage on your walls or what have you, now would be the time to do it. I glue in a little bit of wall sections just falling down on the inside of the building. That's completely optional. A little bit of extra detailing, I take a barbecue skewer and I cut out the pointy bit and poked holes in even amounts along my top wall, and I poked little holes in it, cut out bits of the skewer and just put that little bit of skewer into that, and it just looks a little bit like rebar. Glue that in place with PVA if you do that though. And then we're going to sand it. So with the sand, I'm literally just going to use pure fresh PVA, nothing special here. Whack it on, get an old brush and just spread it about. Do that for the bottom floor and the top floor. I use some larger stones along the walls just to make it look a little bit more like rubble. And then I just used sand for the rest of it. Do that on both floors as I mentioned. Once you've got the sand on your base and your stones, obviously let that dry. and then we're going to paint it. Now for the paint, I'm just going to cover the whole thing in black paint. The only thing here would be I'm going to do one thick coat instead of two thin coats, and for the walls, I'm actually going to try and get a bit of texture by stippling the paint, using the paint as a texture intentionally rather than as a side effect. So you stipple it and you should be able to see some nice little subtle textures on it. Now the one problem I had is I didn't quite let my sand dry, so I'd actually picked up some of the sand as I was going and put that onto the walls, but ultimately it actually added a little bit of nice variation, so I wasn't too displeased with it. Cover the whole thing in black, stippling as you go if you can. Once I actually had painted the whole thing black, I did take a spray paint. Now the reason I didn't spray it black the first time is that spray paints can melt foam. So if you're worried about that, do not use spray paint, you can just do it with a brush. I just very quickly wanted to get a bit of grey on the wall, so I just spray painted it. Now hopefully the black paint would have protected the foam, but you never know, do be careful if you're going to do that. Spray paints do look really nice, so you get nice little subtle variations, etc. Now for the ground, I just took a burnt umber and painted the ground pure brown, obviously ignoring the bits of fallen wall because that's supposed to look like wall colour rather than ground. And then painting is pretty simple. I'm just going to dry brush a lighter grey on the walls and a lighter brown on the floor. If you do the rebar, I just painted that a copper colour. And then I whack on a homemade black wash. It's literally just water and black paint with a bit of dish detergent. And the black wash really turns this building from being like reasonably bland to something a little bit special. It really accentuates all of the detail. You could just leave it after the black wash, but I went back in and just did a couple of dry brushes because I wanted to. Ultimately, I think this building does look very nice. It can be a little bit complicated to explain some of the parts. Now, hopefully the video did a better job than maybe my narration at times. As I said, there is a free template for the measurements. There's a PDF, I'll link it in the description someplace, you'll be able to find it. There's two ways of going about that. You can just check that and use my exact measurements, or you can do your own measurements, obviously. And then the alternative way of doing it would be to simply just print it off, glue stick it to some foam board, and then cut it out, and then remove the paper. That would work super well, super fine. I didn't want to go through all the measurements because it would be a little bit like complex. There's certain things you could do, like instead of doing rubble on the floors where I've sanded them, you could maybe do like a granny grating and maybe do like a nice metallic floor where it wasn't just all rubble. There's all different kinds of things you could have done. Like I've done one in one of my templates, I've got one that uses like a door instead of just pure windows. There's all different extra detail you can do on the basic build like this, but I just wanted to show that even with just something simple like Foamboard, as long as you do the detailing, like we use foam for the window ledges, we use foam for the columns. The two main materials is Foamboard and sand. Everything else, well, I mean, hot glue, PVA, and then I use some barbecue skewers. That is literally everything in terms of materials, and then paints. So ultimately, it's a very like cheap, inexpensive material list. It could take a little bit of time, but you can put in as much detail as you like. Somebody could come along and do a much better version of this than I did, but using the time that I had, I'm pretty happy with the results. Now, if you want to talk about people who make terrain easier for everybody involved, then I would have to recommend Mel the Terrain Tutor. He's got many different videos on foam board buildings for like Warhammer 40k particularly, you know, whether or not it's how to weather them, whether or not it's how to add extra details, etc. I probably won't touch these again in using Foamboard. Unless you guys really like this video, then do let me know in the comments. As I said, there's quite a few different variations I could do, different methods I could use. So if it is something you're interested in, do let me know. Otherwise, I would say go check out Mel the Terrain Tutor. Hope you enjoyed this video. For those of you wondering, I have changed the name of the channel. The channel was called Terrain Oddity. I've now changed that to Terrain Made Easy. I think that really says in 3 words what I'm trying to do with this channel and what I'm passionate about doing. So if that's something you're interested in supporting, there's always there's 4 things you could do. You can like, subscribe, support me on Patreon, or just like share this to your friends or whoever you think might find this kind of stuff useful. Thank you very much for watching though. Have a most beautiful day. Hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.